I hope to bring the spirit of poetry with me today.
I want to thank you for being here. This is a rare occasion, and I want to make the most of it. So I thought we would start by talking a bit about Leadbelly. I had a question prepared, actually. How does the poetic process work in this case, in your case, in order to create that sort of procession of different voices?
Writing Leadbelly took about 5 years. I did a lot of research, and I was pretty much obsessed with the idea of Leadbelly, with his fascinating story, with the kind of crossroads in history that he lived in. His story contains all kinds of relationships between Black people in the United States and the prison industrial complex, the recording industry, anthropology, northern migration, and all of these issues are caught up in that book and in his life. And then I found that would not really sustain it did not give him context. So I sort of expanded to the people around Leadbelly. And then I also expanded to the objects around him. And I just had a rule that I was going to stay in first person throughout the entire book. So it's a book of persona poems.
Throughout the book, all these personas reflect on sound and think about that phenomenon that is the voice that comes from objects, the voice that comes from a body or several bodies, such as the ones that are imprisoned and chained. And how do you deal with voice throughout, the writing process of the book?
One thing that I come to the poems with an understanding of is the fact that for African Americans who were stolen from Africa and were forced to, be separated from our native language, our native religion, even the act of the drum, of playing drums and whatnot. Really, what we were left with was the music, the idea of the music from the motherland. And that is the first literature of Black people in America. So by tapping into the sound, by tapping into the history of that sound, right, I'm tapping into the history of my people.
Say your run-of-the-mill stereotypical idea of how to write a book of poems doesn't really consider research. And I think that's awful because we're researching all the time, even if we don't notice it, right? And you make it evident. You make that part of the creative process quite, obvious. You put it out there. And you have here a timeline and a bibliography or references, and along with the now usual notes. I guess my question is twofold. Firstly, I wanted to ask you about how the process was, how these 5 years of writing.
So that was a lot of just a lot of research, and I'm forgetting the rest of your question. I would also say that a poet does research when they're searching their feelings, so to speak, and they're going through their memory and they're accessing their imagination, or when they're critically, and this is, critical to the life of a poet, reading other poets, to figure out what is out there in the field, what they can, what turns them on, what excites them, what they wish they could do, what they're sure they're not going to do, etc. That's a kind of research as well. What I am was particularly interested is in researching Leadbelly's story. I felt quite strongly that I was also researching my own story in a certain kind of way. You know, Leadbelly is a part of my history, and I felt like I needed desperately to understand that history.
In dealing with the figure of Leadbelly, with his life, and this is quite an intimate question, but how did you manage all the say unsavory episodes, so to speak, the difficult episodes in his life? Because I mean, we have a historical character that is fascinating in many ways, incredibly talented, and at the same time, you throughout the book you don't shy away from, say, the murder.
Leadbelly went to prison twice. Okay, once for murdering a man over a woman. The second time for nearly murdering a man over a song. Okay, and he actually went to prison. He went to jail kind of like a third time, but it was in New York, and it was a totally different incident. Somebody broke in his house, and he stabbed the guy up really bad. He also had a violent history with women. I'm saying, you know, Leadbelly, I want to tell your story, but if I leave this out, I would not be telling the truth of who you are.
Just one more thing about Leadbelly, and it's the as I read it, I kept on thinking this could be a biography in a way. This could also be read as a novel. I'm just amazed at how you managed to create a book that sort of lives in that crossroads of genres. So it's evidently a collection of poems, but at the same time, it's so much more, right? Or it can the genre sort of spills out from usual poetry.
It is a biography in verse. That's really what it is. But I felt that it was critical, you know, to write the timeline, for one, because there was no timeline that existed of his entire life. There was none. Okay, so I had to construct it through the research that I accessed.
Olio is a nation, like such a collage of voices, some in harmony, some in dissonance, but everyone talking, right? And in so many different registers, you have interviews, letters, poems. I don't know. How did you approach such a book? How did you manage?
The idea of the book germinated from researching Leadbelly and then wondering about who were the people that influenced Leadbelly. You know, who were the people that were carrying the legacy of sound, you know, of Black sound and artistic endeavor before Leadbelly. And these were all people that were not recorded. You know, they did not have the advantage did not have the opportunity to seal their legacy on wax, so to speak. And then I started wondering about the history of Black music before the era of recording. And I ran across all these fabulous, amazing stories that roughly take place between the end of the Civil War in 1865 and around the mid-1920s or so. Really until the beginning of World War I. Okay, so and there's just a whole lot of, you know, fascinating stories, and at that time you have the minstrel show. And the middle part of the minstrel show is called the olio, which is just a kind of collection of acts. And if the minstrel show is was created to demean Black people. It's a whole form of entertainment developed by white actors in this country to demean Black people. And it's like a psychological warfare program in theater to enforce the idea of white supremacy, while at the same time, making caricatures of Black life, okay, and Blackness. And the question in the book, it has to do with how did they survive that? How does a Black artist survive that intellectually and spiritually back in the day? And how does that inform how Black people today survive it as well? Okay.
I wanted to ask you about the capacity of a book such as Olia to intervene in historical discourse, right? To not only to point out and give voice to people that were sort of eclipsed, but to actually make the reader aware of a whole chunk of their memory that should be there, but isn't.
Every society, every country, every group of people has a kind of acknowledged history, and then there's another history or various histories, okay, that have not been acknowledged. For me, it has been when you're writing about history, when you're writing with a kind of understanding of history or a kind of acknowledgement of history, it allows you to speak into the past. It's like you're speaking into a well, and you're speaking deep into that well, and then the echoes come back from the past up to you, and then they go beyond you into the heavens, so to speak. And so you're speaking to the past, but you're also speaking to the present, and you're speaking to the future, right? And it's and there's so many fantastic stories, all those hidden stories, all those hidden dialogues, all those that inform us about about the things that have been suppressed or have been ignored. And I'm saying particularly in the case of Black history, which in this country has been ignored and deleted and obscured and obfuscated in so many different ways. It becomes a tremendous opportunity for creativity.
How was, say, your career shaped as a writer? How did the Pulitzer Prize condition it? And say the most practical, I wouldn't say mundane, because, that's our way of living, so nothing in it is really mundane. But yeah, the most practical aspects, good or bad, of what has been your career.
I think one of the hardest things is deciding that you are going to pursue the path of whatever artistic endeavor you're going to pursue, in this case, poetry, which, if you're in it for the money, then that's probably the wrong way to go, and you're going to get your feelings hurt. It's not going to work out like that. But the people I know that are successful at this they're just, I'm going to go back to that word again, obsessed with putting words on the page, making a picture go from their mind to the page and into other people's minds, and having that picture last, beyond their lifetime. So that is what it's really all about. And for me, as far as the Pulitzer, nobody plans to win the Pulitzer. Nobody's out there like, I'm gonna do this. If you, like I said, if you're trying, it's a mistake to approach it like that. But it has definitely, one thing it's allowed me to do is to be with an audience like this, you know, in other parts of the country, or I'm sorry, other parts of the world. And it's given the book like a huge platform. So it's definitely a life changer. You know, more job security. I put it like that.
When did you started to recognize yourself as a poet?
I kind of felt myself as a poet from I was writing poems from like 15 or so, 14. But there's a difference between writing poems as a kind of a hobby and turning it into a kind of vocation. See, my first chapbook, that was probably about 31 or so.
So would you give a poet that wants to, say, introduce or fight for certain improvements in her or his community?
You know, I would say write about what you care about, you know, but I would also say, please study your history. If you don't, you know, please study your history, because you're studying your history or the histories around you, the histories of your country or countries. People have people come from multiple origins, you know, and that will inform you. For me, it serves the purpose of understanding what is the context in which I am living. Like, why is this going on? Why is all this crazy stuff going on right now? It makes a little more sense when you understand the history.
Escuchaba estas canciones nacidas, crudas, en los sembradíos de caña.
Keep going.
Enredadas en la lucha con la tierra, con el herir del látigo. Ahora fui realmente afortunado. Era un aprendiz de sastre, pero luego me vendieron a un comerciante de esclavos. Pasé de enhebrar agujas al escuálido corral de los esclavos a comer cabeza de vaca vieja y colada de maíz. Hasta más tarde, cuando alguien me pasó esa proclama de Lincoln, llegando esa libertad tan demorada. Luego vine a aprender de libros. Nuestro viaje ha sido arduo, cada lengua hilando spirituals a billetes de 10 y de 1 para comprarle a Fisk sus libros de ortografía y ladrillos. Aquí estamos, cada voz resplandeciente como el rapto de la estrella del norte. Hemos llegado muy lejos, cosiendo pulmones a las escrituras.